And welcome again to Cottage Talk. This is our post-match show of Fulham's 1-0 loss to Newcastle United at St. James's Park. One of my guests, Craig Coben, he was there. He'll give us his insight of what he saw, along with my co-host, Mr. Yannis and Craig. Him and I will chime in as well. So, guys, let's not waste any time. Let's just get right to it. First of all, Craig, you are at St. James's Park. Let's just get your opening thoughts on the loss. What did you make of this?
Look, it was a really heartbreaking loss. It was a gut punch to lose in the 88th minute. But I did think that Newcastle had the better of the play. We were unlucky in many respects, but overall they were stronger. They had a bit more energy. And I felt that we were on the back foot for much of the match. They didn't dominate us,
right?
But they were a stronger team. So whilst I think the result was unfortunate and arguably unjust given the controversy around the penalty, at another level, it was more or less a deserved outcome.
Okay. And I'm glad that you started us in that fashion. Before I go to Yannis, I'm just going to share this, that we did a full-time show and we gave a good amount of credit to Newcastle United, and we're going to do it here. And you already got us started because if you look at overall the play, they were the better side. They deserved all 3 points. I don't think that's difficult to say, but as you said, Craig, it's unfortunate the way everything played out. The one thing that I will disagree with some of the comments that I got was I saw on YouTube some Newcastle United supporters, Craig, were claiming that we went there to get a draw. And that is just not true at all. I think until we get to about the 79th minute when we have the substitution, I think that's a controversial call. We're going to talk about that in a bit. But I think Fulham's approach has been the way it has been the entire season. They came there to win. They wanted to play on the front foot. But to your point, I think this has more to do with Newcastle United not letting Fulham play and dominating the ball and dominating the play. Your thoughts, and then I'll go to Yannis.
Yeah, look, I agree with that up to a point, Russ. We did often have 5 in the back with Bobby Decker-Dovere pulling back on the left side to support Kurzawa. Bear in mind, we had our substitute left back, Kurzawa,
right,
because Robinson was suspended for the match. And so I do think Marco Silva recognized that was a vulnerability. He changed the sides of our wingers. So Willian was on the right.
Yes.
And Bobby Decker-Dovere was on the left. And Bobby Decker-Dovere was playing extremely deep. And so I can understand why some fans may think that we were playing for the draw because we did have 5 in the back. That being said, I think our setup was more driven by necessity and the importance of shoring up that side, which Newcastle clearly had targeted, as opposed to parking the bus and playing for a draw.
Interesting stuff. Yannis, over to you. I want to get your thoughts on this and also your opening thoughts on the loss, but it's just interesting to look at this. I'm glad that Craig brought this up because a lot of the commentary on the broadcast was that Bobby Decker-Dovere was playing deep in ways, maybe was playing like a back 5 at times. So what are your thoughts on this? But I don't think Fulham went there to get the draw. I think that they did it, as Craig said, out of necessity, but they were still looking to be on the front foot when they had their opportunities.
Yeah, because you got Kurzawa coming in, and just a point I make, Robinson didn't play either game this year against Blood Money United. So Kurzawa had to come in, and you know what, Decker-Dovere is our Mr. Utility. You stick him back there. And actually, thinking back to the games when we went up to Man City, as an example, we didn't go there and stick 11 men behind the ball. Every game we've played this year, we've played to attack. I mean, the wins against Brentford, against Brighton, then Leicester. These aren't accidents. We're a positive side. So, you know, if there are fans up in the northeast that seem to think that, then they really don't know a lot, because we're not 6th by accident. We're there for reasons. We've won 4 on the trot, 5 on the trot in all competitions.
Right.
And not having Robbo was a big problem for us because it meant we had to rejig the lineup. And Kazawa did okay, but they could have did his usual stellar thing. And same with playing for the draw. Well, remember the first game where we were down to 10 men within 10 minutes? What do they want? Do they think they were going to thump us 5-0? No. We've got a very, very good coach. We don't have the strength and depth that lot have.
Yes.
But we do the best we can with what we've got. And that's what we did. And we were within a few minutes of coming away with, I thought, a deserved point. And had luck, been on our side, we'd have taken the 3 points.
Good stuff there, Yannis. All right. I want to share this from our friend, Chris Goodwin, the Liverpool supporter. I also disagree with those comments from some of the Newcastle fans. You did try to counter when you did have the ball, and that's the point. Thank you, Chris, for sharing that. All right, over to you, Craig. Before we really get into talking about this match, I was thinking about this before we did the show, and I'm going to ask both of you this as kind of a topic to go along with the results here, which is, again, Fulham lose 1-0. So I want to ask you both this. I'll start with you, Craig. Have our expectations as supporters changed over the course of the season to the point where maybe they're a little too high? So we've started with the expectations be, let's just get to 40 points, as you and I were talking about, avoid relegation. Then we have kind of gotten to that point. We're not quite there yet, to maybe the expectations have now changed to mid-table. Then we've kind of went past that hurdle. Now we're talking about, can we fight for Europe? And now we're playing against teams and battling against a team that's probably going to be in the Champions League, to the point where we're very disappointed. I could see so many fans are disappointed. So have our expectations changed too much, Craig?
Well, when I was at St. James's Park, the fans broke into the song to the tune of Yellow Submarine. We are going on a European tour, European tour, European tour.
Right.
So, the fans dream and they fantasize. And at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter what the fans think. It's really where the players and the manager are focused. And one hopes that the players and manager are focused on getting to that 40-point threshold, assuring our safety. It will take a lot of pressure off of the team. And so then they can concentrate on the dream of European qualification. I think if you look at the table and you look at the remaining games, it is still unlikely, certainly not impossible, but unlikely that we will qualify for Europe. We need to have a lot of things go our way. The probabilities are not in our favor. And so really, there's no reason to be focusing on Europe. Priority right now is to stay up. Then we get to mid-table. We just grind out points game by game. And then we see where we are as we approach the end of the season.
Okay, interesting. Yannis, I want to get your thoughts on this, because I'm one that has said, let's focus on Europe. Maybe Craig's right. Maybe I'm jumping ahead a little bit because I'm excited. But I've watched our side here battle everyone, including Newcastle United, who I think are a very quality side. And I'm thinking we can play with anyone, but am I getting ahead of myself too much to the point where maybe I should just still be looking at the task at hand, the 40 points, take it from there, mid-table, and I'm maybe jumping ahead a few steps. Maybe I'm a little bit too excited. What are your thoughts about this? Have some of us gotten a little bit carried away here?
I think fans will rise to the level of expectations. I don't think 40 points is going to keep us up. I think it'll be 36, because the bottom lot of the table are wretched. There are some wretched teams down there right now, and I wouldn't even be surprised if it's something like 31, 32, because teams like Everton and West Ham right now are just awful. Southampton, I think, are just running on vapor. Wolves are improving. Leeds United, I think, are going to be okay. But the bottom of the table is ghastly. I agree with Craig. Let's get to 36 to 38 points. Let's get to safety, and then we start looking at Europe. I think one really good thing about Marcos, he's never talked about Europe. He's never talked about finishing top anything. and Newcastle can talk. They can just talk whatever they want, bollocks about going to Europe. Last time they did win an Intertoto Cup, I know, and as we did, but then we got to we got to a Europa League final, which they haven't. And what we do, I think the fans have sensed the togetherness and the philosophy that Marco and the coaches have brought to a team that was expected to drop back down. And I think fans are thinking, based on some of the rubbish in the lower half, and it really is, that there's no reason why, if we don't get to the whatever points, that we can't maybe dream of getting a chance to play in Europe. Because if I look at the teams just around us, I think we're on a par with Brentford right now. I think some would argue we're slightly maybe ahead, but Chelsea are a bit of a wreck. 85 million on a striker that's Mudryk has not even scored a dozen goals. Liverpool are a mess right now, and they don't have the best centre back in a month for another month. After we play Chelsea away, and that's a game I can't wait for. We've got a good run of games and a cup run, so the fans are looking and thinking maybe we've got a chance of doing something special. I do agree with Craig that keep our feet on the ground, but our performances have warranted this exuberance from all of us. I'm really proud of what they did. Even yesterday, we battled hard and we gave it everything we got. Unfortunately, you're going to get results like that.
Okay, very good. I'm going to share this from Ralph Leach here. He says, it's hard to compete against teams who can bring on a 70 million pound forwards from the bench to score. That's actually a very good point. It is hard to compete with that. But you know what? Fulham did compete. They absolutely competed. Yeah. And I've seen a lot of praise from the Newcastle supporters on Yannis, Fulham going to St. James's Park and maybe being the toughest opponent they had. I think that just shows how far they've come.
It was an interesting game to watch, to be honest. One thing that I will say about that lot is that 1 through 11, they're very, very hardworking. I mean, there are you pick anyone in the lineup, and you got someone like Joe Linton. I'm going to use Joe Linton as a good example. Although ethically, one could argue he shouldn't have played yesterday.
Right.
But from the back to the front, they all work extremely hard, and our lads do the same as well. And that's probably so I can understand the assessment that we were a tough team to play because all our players work tremendously hard on and off the ball. It was one of those games where I didn't really think they were going to score. They didn't really create a lot from open play. There wasn't any real. There was one where Sam Maximin flashed one just wide of the near post, but I didn't think they were going to get anything. And that's a credit to our lads that we kept our shape and we didn't panic. I think Marco, when Marco got together with the coaches this morning and he reflects, I think there's a couple of things he might have done differently that may have changed the game. I mean, it's right about bringing Isak off. He's got bought for 70 million, but substitutions have to be timely and they have to be effective. And maybe if he looks back on it, he'll go, "Oh, maybe I could have made this change here and there." Hindsight and everything else, but overall, we can't be anything but proud of the lads. They gave it everything they had and just came up a bit short.
Okay, very good. All right, guys, before we go through the starting 11 and then breaking down this match, I want to talk about possible situations that could be the turning point of the match. Obviously, we're going to talk about all the controversy dealing with the penalty. There's plenty to really talk about with that. But I also want to talk about something, Yannis, that I'm curious your thoughts on, because I think this might have been the turning point of the match. So, Craig, I want to ask you first. Do you think the double substitution with Tosin and James was a mistake? Now, change of shape. We've already talked about what you shared with Bobby Decordova-Reid. But I'm curious your view on this, because this was going definitely 3 at the back with 3 center backs. Hindsight being 2020, is it fair for us to look back at this and ask the question, was it a mistake?
Was it a mistake? I actually don't think our shape changed that much with their introduction, because what happened was that Kurzawa was brought up to left wing, and Bobby Decordova-Reid effectively moved back into a holding position. So our shape actually didn't change that much. I don't think the reason Newcastle scored was our team was pretty tired by the 80th minute, and B, inexplicably, Diop was out jumped on that cross, and so I don't know if I would lay our defeat at the hands of the double substitution. When I saw the double substitution, it was quite apparent that Marco Silva felt that we were going to try for the draw.
Right.
And that made some sense. We were on the back foot. We were looking tired. They were the stronger team, and they had been creating progressively more and better chances. We thought, we were going to nick a goal with that penalty, but it didn't prove to be the case. So I don't think it was a poor decision on Marco Silva's part. I think we lost the game for other reasons.
Okay, excellent. We'll get to that in just a few minutes. Yannis, over to you, because there are a couple of ways to look at this. Was it a mistake to do this? Craig makes an argument that it was not, based on the situation in hand. However, I'm going to play devil's advocate here. Marco has always been one to play on the front foot, to go for the victory, and this kind of goes a little bit against his philosophy. So I want your thoughts on this. Was this a mistake? Or to Craig's point, maybe it wasn't a mistake. Maybe there were other factors that led to Fulham losing this match.
Well, Craig made a good point about Diop inexplicably missing the header, and I've mentioned this before. That
you have. I remember
in the air, for someone so big and tall, he should be better in the air. And he'll look at that and go, "Oh my God, what have I done there?" But I think with Marco, I think it's a case where you go back to the well, and the well for us this year has been Tom Kearney. Bring him on, settle it down in the center of the park. He's going to distribute. He's going to stretch the field. So when I saw Dan James, I was like, okay, yeah, all right. So he's going to go running around doing what he does, and he does creates chances through his speed. But what you really need with a team that's played a very tough game against Chelsea on Thursday, to have to travel to the northeast, which was absolutely ridiculous. Marco Silva was fuming in the presser, the pre-game presser about this, and I absolutely agree. What you sort of need, you've got Harrison Reed was looking a little leggy, so was Paul Heenan, and bring Tom in and just settle it down in the centre of the park and see what happens there. And he didn't. And I was watching him going, right, Tom's going to come on 65 minutes, and he didn't. And I'm not sure what his thinking was. I'm not going to have a go at Marco. He's been brilliant. Okay. I'd have brought him on. But he just tried something a little different. Look, these aren't horses. You're making athletes play 180, 190 minutes of footy in a matter of 3 days, which would probably be between, I don't know, 18 and 24 kilometers of work running outside in weathers and including travel is ridiculous. This is one of the criticisms that Premier League managers have about the Christmas schedule. We do love it, but it's very tough on players. And I think this, as he said, it's not Newcastle's fault because that was originally on the schedule. It was rescheduling the Chelsea game to go on a Thursday and then go up to Newcastle. So the Premier League really need to take a look at this, because we saw, you remember, Craig, this when Fabrice Mwamba went down for Bolton against Tottenham and basically had cardiac arrest. White Hart Lane. And we remember what happened in the NFL a couple of weeks ago.
Yes.
It was publicized Damar Hamlin. And you know what? These aren't machines. I'm surprised that more of these don't happen. We saw it with Christian Eriksen, obviously. It can be overexertion. You see at the end of marathons. And I think what Silva said was a big point. By the 80th minute, you could see we were running out of gas. And I don't think that's fair, because we had to travel. They had more time to rest. between the games. It's a ludicrous schedule decision. And, it just, I suppose it culminated with what was really a soft goal in the end.
Right.
But look, he's done everything he's done this year. He's turned to gold, Marco. So I'd have bought Tom in, but I mean, so be it. It's just, fine.
Okay, very good. All right. Craig, over to you. Let's now focus on the starting 11 before the match and the bench overall as well. What were your thoughts when you saw this an hour before the match began?
Well, no real surprise with three new players, but I think the key element to highlight is that we don't have the depth to rotate our midfield, and so as a result, we're using the same midfield that we used 2.5 days earlier at home against Chelsea. And as Yannis has very eloquently said, our team is suffering from fatigue due to lack of rest and lack of rotation. And that's really what stood out for me in the starting 11. The starting 11 was almost exactly as I had predicted it, or was exactly as I had predicted it, given some of this, the various suspensions that have happened and so forth. But really, it's the fact that our midfield engine is being called on again to do a lot of heavy lifting.
Good point. How about you, Yannis?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I mean, Reed, Palhinha, and Pereira have been superb, but we need the depth in there. And that maybe where Kenny could have come in, but with the transfer deadline, we've got 2 more weeks of it. We've got to look at, I don't know why Chalobah's still around the squad. Well, honestly, I still have nightmares about that Newcastle goal, the Newcastle first game. But we do need depth, and Newcastle have it. And let's be honest, the top teams have it. When you've got players, they got players like Lascelles and San Maximin and Isaac and Manquillo and Murphy Murphy, Ritchie, you can bring off the bench. And you look at ours and you go, okay, yeah, right, yeah, there's a few good players in there, but we're not quite there yet. We need another summer to build it and make it even stronger in terms of the starting 11. We really missed Robinson. I'm going to say it again. We really missed Robinson, because the thing about Robinson, he would have kept Almiron honest. And that, I think, on that left side is where we could have really hurt them. It's just circumstance. He was injured the first game, suspended for yesterday's game, but I think he could have really made a difference. But where we are in terms of a squad now, if we're doing this well and we're sixth, it's saying that, this is the start of something. And Newcastle have more money, and obviously they've got greater depth, and that's fine. But we're on the right tracks. It's not a disgrace to lose to Newcastle away, for sure. But it's a process, and I think that Marco and the coaches know the process, and we'll keep doing as we do, and hopefully we get to a point where there's competition literally for every position, and that's what marks it differentiates between the good sides and the potentially great ones. So.
Okay, great stuff there, Yannis. All right, before we go and break down this match, I'm going to share a couple comments. This is from Martin Hunter, who I think is a Newcastle United supporter. So this is what he shared. You give us a really good game, better than most sides have when they've come up here. Fulham are a good side, playing good stuff. You just didn't get the rub of the green. Over to you, Craig. What are your thoughts about that? Do you agree with him?
Well, Martin, thank you for the comments. I think that they're very gracious from your end. We didn't get the rub of the green when it comes to the penalty and the controversy and everything that happened around it. I do think, taking a step back, Newcastle were the stronger side.
I agree.
Maybe because they have greater depth, maybe because they have greater resources, maybe because we didn't have enough time to rest our key players. So at one level, we were unlucky. At a micro level and a macro level, the result was probably just.
Okay, excellent stuff. All right, let's break it down, guys. Let's talk about the first half. Craig, I'll go to you. You were at St. James's Park. We're just going to talk in general terms. So give me your thoughts on what you watched for the first half at St. James's Park, and then I'll go to Yannis.
Well, it was a first half of 3/3, you could say. The opening stretch, I thought Newcastle had the better of the play. They had a couple of opportunities. They started to expose our defense. We were playing a high line. They got behind it a few times. They were pressing us, and we struggled to get the ball out. We were never in danger. We never gave up the ball in a dangerous position, but we were struggling to get the ball out and to break their press. And sometimes we were having to hit it long. I think the middle part of the first half, we played a lot better. We were on the front foot. We had a bit more control. And then by the end of the first half, I thought that Newcastle was starting to assert themselves. I guess the one thing that was holding back Newcastle was the ankle injury to Bruno Guimaraes. And because I think he was actually quite effective during the time that he was playing. And of course, he had to be substituted at halftime. But, I did think on balance, Newcastle had the better of the play, although we did have some good stretches. It was also quite apparent in that first half that Newcastle were going to target our left back. And I didn't think the communication between Kurzawa and Decordova-Reid was seamless. I think they were both at times caught a little bit out of position. And we were vulnerable to overloading, even though Decordova-Reid was tracking back. And I think it's because neither Decordova-Reid nor Kurzawa were accustomed to be playing there. Kurzawa hasn't really played left back, hasn't started a league game, or maybe he's been in one. And Decordova-Reid has been on the right side in every match that I've seen. So I think a lack of familiarity with the new tactical setup, was one of the reasons why we were, I think, struggling in that area, and that Newcastle did have some joy along their right side, our left side.
Okay. Over to you, Yannis. Thoughts on what Craig just shared with his analysis, and feel free to share yours.
I kept thinking during the game that this was going to be a 0-0. It felt like a game of chess. I agree with the left side. I was wondering before the game, would he play Kurzawa? Would he play Bobby Decordova-Reid, because it's one of the few positions he's not played? That's how much Robinson means to us as a team. I mean, you see his value there. And Newcastle did do a good job of targeting that, but didn't really do anything in open play to really. It was one of those weird games where I thought, they ain't going to score in a month of Sundays. And Craig is right. There was a lack of synergy between the two lads, but I think that's to be expected. I mean, because Kurzawa's been in the club a few months, but has been injured. And, doing it on the practice field, then coming up against, Almiron, I would say, is close to being a world-class player, is very, very difficult, and, in front of 52,000 fans. So I thought, despite that, we did well, really, to nullify what they were doing. I didn't really think they were going to do it. They were getting close to scoring, and Leno looked pretty comfortable in net. But it's one of those situations where, Marco will look at it and say, well, is Kurzawa the answer as the backup? Because teams are going to start coming and knocking on the door for Robinson. I don't think it's going to take long. We always knew he was a fantastic athlete, but defensively he's improved this year. And we've got to look at strengthening in all areas, and that's what happens when you lose a player at left back. You go, well, left back, should it make a difference? Well, it did. I thought it did yesterday. It seemed to cause imbalance in the squad, and that was a shame. And then I think it shows us where we are in the journey. But hey, we're still sixth. I mean, we're sixth, for crying out loud. It's just beyond our wildest dreams. It's lovely to see us and see West Ham and Everton floundering like rotten fish at the bottom. It is. So you know what? I can't get too despondent about it, but I will carry on moaning about the schedule because I just think it. I think it's fair,
Yannis. I think it's fair. It's not taking away from the victory for Newcastle United. It's the reality. The reality is, and I knew when Marco started complaining about it, that this is something that he was extremely concerned about, and it played out as Craig said. the team tired near the end of the match. And I don't think it's a surprise why they did.
Yeah. Yeah, we ran out of gas. And they gave it everything. They left everything on the pitch.
Did.
They've done it in every game. Even the 4-1 home loss to that lot. We were down to 10 men. They played very well on the day, but we never stopped battling. We never stopped fighting. I remember Bobby got the late goal to make it 4-1, and it showed the spirit in the team. They fight for each other, and there were some really positive aspects. It's just a shame, that we had to play it. But you know what? We've got Tottenham next, and Tottenham yesterday looked pretty grim themselves. So there's not a team that we should go out and go, oh, we should worry about them. Look, we were injury time against United. City, injury time. Look how close we've come. These Arsenal, we gave them a really hard time. So we're fighting. We're fighting, and good things will come.
Okay, and that's actually a good point. And I know we're in midstream here, and we'll talk about the second half. I'm glad that you brought this up. Strange time to bring it up, but I'm going to bring it up now, and I'm curious Craig's view on this. This is more of a general topic, Craig. And I thought about this after the match. Yannis just brought it back to my mind. Let's talk a little bit about this. We've come close to all the teams around us in the top 6, all these teams, but we've come up short time and time again. Is this does this show you how much we're progressing? But does it also show you what we're missing to get over the hump to beat these teams or even get points off these teams? What is the difference between Fulham coming up just short and getting over the top and beating the Arsenals and the Newcastle Uniteds?
I think it's the top 4 teams, not the top 6 teams. Look, I think I wouldn't draw too many conclusions from it, except that we are competitive with those teams in a way that we haven't been in our previous stints in the Premier League. Those teams do have more depth. They have more resources. You tire at the end of the games. And the better teams, the teams at the top of the table, will tend to score late goals sometimes. Yes, it's unfortunate it's happened 3 or 4 times, but I wouldn't read too much into that. And each game has its own particular story and its own particular tale to tell as well. I think Yannis makes a very powerful point that we don't have the depth that we need. We probably do have more financial constraints than some of these other teams, not only because they have more money, but also, with 2 of them are backed effectively by sovereigns in the Middle East, but also because we are coming up against the financial fair play rules, and I believe that they will be preventing us from spending the kind of money that we otherwise would be able to spend. And so I think we're going to have a tricky time in the transfer market because we're going to need to sell to spend to a significant degree.
Okay. Excellent stuff there, Craig. All right. Coming up next, we're going to talk about the second half and all the controversy that goes along with that. And we'll end with man of the match. Okay, guys, let's get to it. Let's talk about the second half. I've got 4 key moments that we're really going to break down. Let's start here. I'm going to go to you first, Yannis, because I know we're going to talk about the situation with Bobby Decordova-Reid, Mitro, and then, of course, the goal. But before that, there was a situation that I thought potentially was a penalty. I thought maybe Andres Pereira went down a little easy. But after looking at it again and some of the commentary I've heard about it, it's an interesting thing for us to talk about because Marco addressed it after the match that potentially Fulham should have had an advantage here, that Dan Burns should have been sent off for a red card, and we should have had a penalty with Pereira on the Pereira challenge. So I'm going to ask you the question. Let's start here. Should Fulham had a penalty on Pereira with Burn getting a red card as well?
Yes. Yeah, yes to both. And that was the weird thing about it. I'm screaming because it looks a clear penalty, and there's no indication from VAR. And again, soon after Bobby gets taken out, and they go to the Bobby challenge and not the Pereira challenge. It was a little odd, and it was impactful because for the former that would have been a red, and for the latter it wasn't. It was just odd. It was just an odd. You could technically, I think technically have given two. You can't give two penalties, but you could have given two penalties there, and it turned out to be a massive mistake. I don't know. I can understand their fans being upset with the Bobby challenge potentially.
They're very upset, by the way. Extremely upset.
You know, good for them. But the thing is, if they're truly objective and they say they know their football, then how in hell's name would they say that the challenge on Pereira wasn't a penalty? I'm waiting for that one. I'm really waiting for. And you can message me. My kid was at the game,
right?
And because she lives in Newcastle, and I said to her, and she was a Newcastle fan, and I said, "Did you see both?" She said, "Yes." And I said, "What were your thoughts?" She said, "Well, I know there's a bunch of fans were like gasping because they were convinced that was going to be the Pereira challenge was going to be a penalty."
Yeah.
So, I mean, all I want, all of us want, I mean, Craig was obviously there, is we want the right call. That's all we want.
Exactly.
I mean, the right call. We saw this on Saturday. We saw this with the United City game that swung on a potential offside that should have been given as an offside. Like when you've got all this technology, you've got a referee and two assistants, and you've got VAR. Make the right call. They do it, and you and I have talked about this, haven't we? Cricket, rugby, hockey, football. They get it right. Why can we not get it right?
And that's going to lead to all of the controversy going along with Mike Dean. There are people furious with Mike Dean. So, Craig, I want to go to you. You saw this live. What were your thoughts when you saw this?
Well, I first should just say at the outset that the away supporters are seated in the nosebleed level at St. James's Park. You are way up. I think it's 140 steps you have to climb to get there. So, it's great that I have X-ray vision because otherwise I wouldn't have been able to see it. Now, the penalty incidents happened just at our end, so I could actually see it relatively well, although with a tremendous amount of perspective. I thought the Pereira challenge was a stone-cold penalty. I didn't think the challenge.
Steve Lydiard agrees with you, by the way, who's a ref. Go ahead.
Okay, I thought Pereira was a penalty. I thought Dan Burns' challenge on Pereira was definitely a penalty. I did not think the other challenge on Decker-Dover-Reid was a penalty. So I was actually quite surprised when we look at the screen and the VAR had reviewed the Decker-Dover-Reid challenge. So I agree with Yannis. It was the wrong penalty. It was the wrong incident to review. And had they reviewed the correct incident, Dan Burn probably should have been sent off, and that could have changed the outcome of the game. And so that to me is the real controversy in the match is they reviewed the wrong penalty.
Okay, excellent stuff, and that's really where I think we should be concentrating. But let's just go and talk about this real quick, guys, because the Bobby Decker-Dover-Reid one is the one that's really infuriating the Newcastle United supporters, and I do understand it because at the time we did not see another view of this. There were a couple of different views, and that this is one of the reasons why Mike Dean's under a lot of pressure here. But Yannis, on Bobby Decker-Dover-Reid penalty.
See, I think it was marginal, but I think it was. I think it was just outside. It was just inside the box. Bobby's been nailed before, if I'm not mistaken, for diving.
Yes.
I don't think this was. But then if it's it's still. Craig's right. I mean, I was sort of mystified with the timing of it. You got the two challenges, and then you decided to go to the second, not the first. It was just a bit. It was a bit weird. But this is it was crap officiating. Like, let's call it the way. Let's call it out for what it is. It's terrible refereeing. I mean, you make the right calls for hell's sake. And if you don't know how to make the call, that's okay. That's okay. Then go upstairs and check the bloody videotape. And for all those fans, we took 1,500 fans up there. Oh, bless their cotton socks. They were so loud. It's a long journey to Newcastle. I mean, this ain't up the road. It's a hell of a trek up there. And you
4-hour train ride.
Yeah, and you get balls up by some stupid ref who needs an optician's thing. And that wasn't even the half of it, of course, because then we had the penalty, and now we got the video evidence of what happened during the penalty. And if it makes the players angry and Marco even angrier, great. But I think it is so bad for football. I really do. I just want it done properly. I don't want you to do a knee replacement of my left knee when my right knee is the one that needs to be done. Just do the damn job. Belichick, do your job, right?
Do
your job. And so it was a bad weekend. It was a bad weekend for Premier League. Some great games, but the United C, just horrendous. Come on.
Okay.
Get it right.
So, Craig, do you agree with Yannis? Basically, get the call right. And it's just, like I said, it's these two situations. You're pretty far away. So thoughts on Bobby Decker-Dover-Reid?
Look, from my angle, I thought Bobby Decker-Dover-Reid went down pretty easily, and it was a soft penalty.
Yeah.
I thought the Dan Burn challenge on Pereira was a stone cold penalty.
Okay.
I think what's frustrating is that the Premier League introduced the VAR system to eliminate a lot of the most obvious errors, and yet they continue to be made. And you can reduce human error, but you can't eliminate that. And I think that's basically the takeaway.
That's great. And like I said, this is going to the ref and also to Mike Dean, who's under, like I said, a lot of pressure here. I read a lot of articles about him, both obviously from the Newcastle United supporters, but still, he's under a lot of pressure for his decision as being the VAR referee. Okay. So, Craig, over to you. And I said this to Max on Full Time. You guys have watched a lot more football than me. Have you ever seen a penalty like this from Mitro before?
Not from Mitro. I'm not sure I've even seen.
No, I mean I should say in general.
I mean, here's the irony, Russ. So I was filming the penalty, okay, and I'm so high up, okay, and then when we discovered that the penalty was disallowed because he slipped and kicked it twice and it was indirect free kick, I played that video repeatedly like it's the Zapruder film. We're filming JFK's assassination. I played it over and over again. I couldn't see the double kick. Now I know that it was and the rest of it, but it's amazing that it was spotted as such.
Yeah.
You can question whether the rule makes any sense, but be that as it may, it's really bad luck. I don't know what else you can say.
Okay.
I know it's a family broadcast.
Right.
I'm going to say this anyway.
Say
it happens.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Yannis, do you agree with Craig on that?
Absolutely. I was gutted for Mitro, and I still am, because I mean, all the games I've played, all the games, how many years I coached, I've never seen that. And it was credit to Pope, because he, as soon as the ball went past him, he signaled double touch. It's one of those instances where you don't need to say anything to Mitro, because his body language after that goal told you everything you need to know. Nobody will have felt worse about what happened there than he did. We as fans can say whatever, but this is a guy that takes his footy seriously. He's given us everything he's got. It was gruesome bad luck. And, these things do happen. And, he'd probably been the journey is long enough as it is, and I'm sure training this morning, Marco would have got with him and sat him down 1v1 and said, you know what, as Craig says, shit happens. It's okay. You worked hard, whatever. You do too much anyway. He's not an Ivan Toney. I don't think anyone is. Let's be honest. So it happened. You've been magnificent. We move on. Let's get ready for Spurs. Let's get ready for them, and then the cup game, and see what happens. And that's the one thing about Marco. You can feel that he identifies with the players, that he cares about the players. It's a family culture. The players will have felt terrible for him as well. And that's the sense that I get from the club. And they'll just brush it off, look at the video, and they'll move on. The 8 days between games, I really believe that. But it was just terrible luck. It's, if we go 1 goal up, then Newcastle ain't coming back. They ain't coming back from that. They didn't look like they were going to do anything, but we gave them life, and then they nicked it at the end. So they can, that's fine. But it was gruesome luck.
Absolutely, Yannis. And I'm glad that you brought this up, because the fact that Mitro does not score here changes the match, because then they got, as you said, life, and they were on the ascendancy from that point on. They were looking very likely to score. They did score. So I have to give them credit for that. They were really pushing hard, and we were having a hard time dealing with it. So maybe that ultimately was why Marco made the switch that he did with the substitution. But let's talk about the goal. Craig, I've watched this several times. We've already talked a little bit about Diop's role. So let's talk about the winning goal from Newcastle United. Let's give him credit, but it was basically just a unmarked easy header. So call it what it is. But let's just talk about this, Craig.
Well,
who's most responsible? Who's most responsible for the goal?
Well, I don't think Diop should have been out jumped, and I think Tosin was caught ball watching as well. I mean, when you have those kinds of guys, really tall players, in the back, and you lose to a fairly header. It was a good cross, but it wasn't an amazing cross. I think I think they switched off. There's no way around it. These things, they happen. I think I think Diop is still a little bit erratic. I know that the Athletic correspondent Peter Rutzler praised his performance on Twitter. I thought that he was a little bit more inconsistent and was caught out a few more times than maybe Mr. Rutzler did. But I still don't think that either of those players are quite at ease. The cross was a little bit too easy to get in as well. We start sitting a bit deep sometimes as we get tired, and I think that's been a problem in a few games. Look, they switched off for a nanosecond. That was enough to allow Newcastle the opportunity to score. Newcastle's good players. They're very well-resourced team, and a moment of neglect is pretty costly.
Yep, totally agree on that. Yannis, who's most responsible for the goal?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure it's who. I think it's what. I think it's fatigue. I think fatigue will do that. I think that again, 72 hours. I know Diop didn't play on Thursday, but you're part of the build-up and what have you. And this is, it would have been an exhausting 72 hours, and it forces players, often to switch off because they're mentally drained. It's not just the physical; it's the mental attention to detail that you have to put in. And for 88 minutes they did it, and it was just a moment. That's all it was. And Tosin, switched off. Diop, it shouldn't have been out jump, but man, he worked hard. They all worked hard. They all put it in. They all put in a shift. And it would, I didn't hear Marco talk about this, but if, he could turn around and say, well, it's no wonder we made a mistake. I mean, name teams that can that have the lack of depth that we do, that can play as hard as we did against Chelsea and deservedly come up with the goods. And then all of a sudden, it's one mistake. It's one mistake. That's all it was. It was one mistake, and that was it. And that's tough. But it's one of those words. It's gutting. It's gutting in the sense that Callum Wilson, who did nothing the whole game, and frankly, I think is a fraud, because he's not. If Newcastle want to do anything, they're not going to do it with him. I think the only reason he's even starting games is because of that relationship with Eddie Howe. The real sort of Isak 70 million, bit of a laugh that, but and it's sort of it's accidentally rebounded off his body, and Isak's half a centimetre out. It's come out of nothing, absolutely nothing. And sometimes you've got to be good to be lucky to be good. And that was lucky. I don't care what anyone Newcastle fan says. That was lucky. It's come off the guy's stomach. And Isak couldn't miss. As my mum said last night, even I couldn't have missed. So it was one of those things. They can say about domination and what have you, but they are at home. They were at home, remember. And there's expectations, and they're fourth in the table and all their resources and all that sort of stuff. And it's little old Fulham, and we beat 4-1 early in the season, and we should stop them. There was none of that. And we showed a lot of fight, a lot of heart and credit. And I think it wasn't a matter of who, it was what. And I think we just ran out of gas in the end, and it was just a moment.
Okay. I have to share this from our friend Chris here. It's a bad defeat when Yannis sounds pissed.
I don't. Craig alluded to it earlier, and that's I was watching the Jacksonville Jags, their playoff game against the Chargers of the weekend. Our owners there, Shad Khan, and he has built his fortune through industry and hard work and sweat, and he's done it honestly. And he's done it honestly for all the endeavours. But Craig said earlier, you got two teams in the top four that are funded by sovereign states, and sovereign states get their money through natural resources, and the natural resources are oil. It's not through ingenuity; it's through oil. So they, if you want to look at gift horse, and if you want to be really blunt, Joe Linton shouldn't have played yesterday, because anybody who's been arrested for drink and driving charge, it should be, if you have an ethical blueprint as a manager of a club, that person is suspended, number one. Number two, bearing in mind what we know about the human rights violations in Saudi Arabia and what a lot of the people have to be subjected to, then I'm proud to be part of a club, and have been all my life, whose owners, although occasionally odd, have always come through their wealth through honest means. And I can pride myself and take that to the grave. Newcastle fans can't do that. They can't. That's a working man city, Newcastle. And it's always been about working class players and working class fans. They can't say that right now. And so I have a problem with Newcastle, and I have a problem with Man City as well. For those reasons, I just that's what the Wrexham. I don't know if you guys have seen the Wrexham story.
Love it. I love
Incredible.
it.
I mean, McElhenney and Ryan Reynolds, and we love Ryan Reynolds here in Canada, obviously. And what a beautiful story! What a beautiful story! And through hard work and a club that used to be renowned, North Wales, and now, they could make it through the National League, and everybody will root because the owners and the philosophy and the manager and the players. It's a tough pill for me as well. I was upset yesterday, and a part of it is to do with the ethical. It's my ethical. I grew up standing on the stands of Craig Cottage with 2,000 fans against Torquay. So I'm actually proud to have the Khans as the owners. I am, because I know.
I'm glad you're saying that, Yannis. It's very nice of you to say, and I agree with you. I'm very proud to have Shahid and Tony as the owners of Fulham Football Club. You can say what you want. You can criticize some of the moves, some of the things that they've done. But overall, they've done right by Fulham Football Club and the supporters overall. And
look at Chelsea.
And they do it the right way.
Yeah, look at Chelsea, Russ. Look at Chelsea. I mean,
I know.
I grew up. I was at the last game we won at Stamford Bridge in '82. I was at that game, and they were a West London club with a fair amount of success, but not one of the biggest clubs. And they won a few cups and And then when Abramovich came in, again, it's the same stuff. The oligarchs and it's the oil money, and all the funding he did in Chelsea this and Chelsea that. Now that Abramovich has left, you see, even with Todd Burley being the owner, you see a dysfunctionality of a club that has lost an identity. And Fulham have never lost their identity. We've always been a family club. We have always been close, and we've valued what we have, and we've never been arrogant. We're Fulhamish. We take our lumps. We have more crap than you can care. But I'm proud of that. And that's something that Chelsea will never have. An identity. We have an identity. Craig is wearing that fantastic sweater, and I remember that, Craig, because that was the sweater. Actually, that was when Kappa was. That was the Kappa sweater, because I had about. Yes, exactly. Yes,
it's old school. Well, not quite old school. It's old. 2006, 7. I don't know.
Yes, 6, 7, and it's Fulham, and that's why we're proud of Fulham, and that's who we are. So I know I'm going to get nailed fit by Newcastle fans. I could care less.
Okay. Okay, guys, we do have to wrap up the show, but before we do, Craig, give me a minute match. I actually had it as Issa Diop. I actually agree with Peter Russell, but you were there, so please feel free to share who you think was your man of the match. Maybe Bernd Leno. Is there someone else?
It's a tough question because nobody really stood out. But I would probably have to say it was Bernd Leno. I think that he had another strong game between the sticks, made some pretty important saves, which we didn't have the time to talk about.
Yeah.
It's not that the other players didn't play well, but he was the one who stood out the most. If I had to choose an outfield player, it probably would have been Harrison Reed.
I thought he played great.
A pretty solid game, but I don't think he stood out sufficiently for me to make him
a man of the match. Okay. How about you, Yannis?
I thought I'm going to give it to Kenny Tete. Actually, I think interesting. He's played very well for us when fit, but since the Cedric Suarez talk about getting him from Arsenal, he seems to have taken it another level. And right now, I almost say he's irreplaceable in this lineup. I just think he's so consistent in terms of defending, in terms of pushing up with the midfielders, the overlapping runs. His crossing has become even better. I thought he worked very, very hard. There's not one player that I can honestly say, even the subs where I could say they didn't put the shift in. And that was the thing I was most proud of. And I'll give them some credit, because the one thing that Eddie Howe has done with that team, as expensive as they are, is whether you're Almiron or Sam Maximin or Longstaff, they all work their tails off. They outwork. You can see why they're doing well, because the philosophy is there. And our lads did it. There's no one to a man that didn't put it in. And that's, I think, what was the most gutting bit about that. Because a 0-0, we take it and we go back down the M1. I suppose we'll have games like where we all gut it and win it late and da-da-da. But it just, if a team deserved a point for effort, I think we did. That's not the way it works.
Okay, very good. All right. One last topic for you, my friend, and we'll end the show. This is from Chris Goodwin. Yannis, will the Bills win at the weekend?
I think we will. Because Burrow last night seemed to have trouble. And this is off topic, but with the Ravens, especially on the right side of that O line, they're really beaten up. And it's a team that has just had so much adversity. The Bengals are a super team. I was hoping the Bengals were going to win so that we could play the Jags.
That would have been great.
That would have been great. I think we're going to win by 3. I think it'll be an absolute barn away. Tonight's a fantastic. Dallas are playing at the Bucks.
I know. I'm looking forward to it. And I know many of our supporters who are listening are probably like, can you please stop talking NFL? So we will stop talking about it. We're going to wrap this up. Craig, thank you so much for joining Yannis and myself tonight. I hope you enjoyed it.
Fantastic. And I'm still my sister-in-law, because my wife has a twin, and I got the better half of it, by the way. Luckily, she won't be watching, but she's a Newcastle supporter, and luckily she didn't contact me after the game because I'd have ripped her throat out. If I hear anything about, shut up. And as I say, I'm going to repeat it one more time. Mitro, I'm gutted. I don't want to hear this thing about, should he stop taking penalties? Has he not earned enough capital in his career with us to have the right to take the penalties? I think so.
I actually think that he won't be taking the next penalties, but because I think that even though this was a bit of a fluke, I think that it's going to throw his confidence off, and I think Marco knows that. But we'll find out.
Yeah, maybe we'll give
Herrera's a good ball striker.
We'll find that out soon enough, guys. I want to mention this before we end the show. Also, please do subscribe on YouTube and Apple Podcasts. It does help other Fulham supporters find us. I actually did a podcast yesterday called the EPL Roundtable with 2 Tottenham Hotspur supporters. And guys, they both are very worried about this matchup against Fulham. And you know what? I agree with them. I think Fulham have a very good chance to beat Tottenham Hotspur at Craven Cottage. That's still a week away, but I look forward to that. That's where Fulham are right now. But let's wrap this up. For Craig Coleman and Yannis, I'm Russ Goldman. Thank you as always for watching and listening to Cottage Talk, now part of the talkSPORT Fan Network.